click the go live button. Okay, so now I got to press it again.
Oh.
So everybody just missed like the first half of the show. So
Oh,
sorry
that was
about
the
that, guys.
best part. Y'all missed my bestest jokes.
Well, it's fine. This is going to go up as the whole show is going to be edited and put up in the podcast and everything. So whatever. Sorry, guys. I don't know what happened to YouTube. I told it to start the stream and it didn't start until and I clicked it. I was like, why isn't it started? And then
It's probably me, Jim. I'm not like.
It's all on my end.
I have bad
OBS.
juju.
This is all OBS's fault. So sorry about that. You missed the best part of the show. I guess you can go home. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't worry. The whole show will be available tomorrow morning. It'll be up if all goes well. But yeah, so my thing wasn't like the Ninja Turtles underwear. I mean, I had the Ninja Turtles underwear, but I would take them off to watch them. The one thing that my parents did have a trouble with me with was, I think when I was about like 6 or 7, I don't remember which, my aunt was really into like sewing, and they would go into like these big sewing places where they had like these little kits made out of like tissue paper and like outlines, and they would like, you could buy whatever you want, like dresses or whatever, and you'd open it up and then you buy the fabric for it and then make those clothes, right?
The pattern. It's the pattern. You make the pattern with the paper. Yeah, I've done that.
Well, they had a Batman one. And my aunt was like, I know you like Batman. I'm going to make you a Batman costume for Halloween. So she made me a Batman costume for Halloween, and it was the black one, right? It was the same pattern for the black one and the 66.
The blue.
Yeah. The 66 Batman. And so she knew that I was like really into the new Batman and the old one, but she was like, I'll make you the black one because it looks cooler. And I wore it for Halloween. And I also wore it the day after Halloween and the day after that, and the day after that. Yep. My parents made me wash it. Then they washed it, and then I'd wear it again. And I would like run around the neighborhood and like for a good year. I would almost wore it every day except for school. And I was mad that I couldn't wear it to school. My parents were like, no.
Like, why
That's not going to happen.
For my son, it was a pumpkin outfit. He had a little pumpkin like sweatsuit that he loved and wanted to wear it all the time until he got he's so tall. And even as a little child, he was very tall, and it was up to his knees or something. And he was like, the pants were really tight. So I'm like, God, I don't think you can wear this anymore.
Yeah. I ended up outgrowing it. Yeah. I ended up outgrowing it. I think it was within like the first year I had it because I was growing a lot. So
yeah. That's the good stuff about childhood though, right? That's fun. That's good times.
Good times. By the way, I am so glad that I remembered to hit record. I would have been completely fucked for this episode because
been in trouble.
I forgot to hit record the last few times that we did this, but I had to wait for the YouTube to render it. It would have sucked.
You only get me to quote "Devil went down to Georgia once."
Yeah,
that's
it. So, what is your opinion? Like, were you ever pro-abortion at any point in your life, or were you? I don't know your history. Or maybe we should dig into the history of all that, because I think there's some interesting things to say about your perspective on this.
Whew, there's been a lot of stuff going on with it. Yeah, it's funny because I don't know if you know, I was in a cult since I was 13.
Maybe the listeners don't. Yeah.
Okay, so I was
in
a cult.
Tell me all about it.
Since I was 13 till the time I was 27 years, whatever that is. I don't math, but in that cult, that religion, they don't believe abortion is murder, even though it's a Christian ministry. And so they don't believe that you're alive until you breathe, because of a verse in the Bible. It says Adam became a living soul, nefesh kai in the Aramaic, I think it is, and means living soul, where you like breathe in. Mm-hmm. And so that was always their reasoning for that. But once I left that religion and I'd already, become like a libertarian, and it takes a while to work your way out of these things. I changed my position on that.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm no longer I guess you would say I was never really pro-choice in the way that,
Well, everybody,
you should have as many abortions as you want, like there, responsibility is supposed to be a thing. But yeah, it didn't bother me up until later on.
So
So,
I heard Penn and Teller say this on bullshit once, where they were talking about like pro-life and pro-choice, and they were like, "Those are stupid buzzwords." It's whether or not you're for or against abortion, because everybody's pro-choice and everybody's pro-life. But I don't know if that's necessarily true for either side. So I mean, like, I think those are just because it's so annoying, because I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm pro-life, and then someone will be like, well, you're for killing people who want to break into your house, and I'm like, okay, but that's not what it's talking about. But okay, and so I'm just like, okay, we're talking about abortion. I'm gonna say I'm anti-abortion now, or pro-abortion, whatever
people.
one.
Yeah, or the people that, how many babies are you gonna adopt? All
Zero.
that stuff. Like, yeah, 0.
And I'm also not gonna make any either.
Right, and you're gonna figure that out, right? Like, all on your own by yourself.
Kids are sticky, and they ask too many questions.
Yes, they're more than sticky. Let me tell you, they're disgusting.
Yeah,
children, and for like a year at least, they just are snot factories. At like the 2-year mark, there's something going on with their immune system. I forget what it is. It's like really ramping up, and so they just snot constantly. I have PTSD from the snot years. So
yeah, I'm good with milky vomit. I'm good. Have fun with that. I had nephews. I took care of them when they were babies, all the way up into adults.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm done with kids. They're fine.
Yeah.
When they have kids, maybe I'll be like, oh, my great nieces or whatever. But no, done.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to like grandparenthood. I was never I'm not the kind of woman that loves babies. Like, I don't like to be needed by anyone too much, and that is a lot of neediness when you have an infant. So for me, my kids didn't get fun until they were like like the 2, they were both potty trained by then. But like when they could like go to the bathroom by themselves and didn't need any help from me whatsoever, that's when I'm like, oh yeah, things are looking up. And now, like, my youngest is 11, my oldest is 19, so they're basically grown. Like, I just like they're, they pretty much do what they want.
They just give you headaches now.
Sometimes, yes.
It's
they ask too many questions for sure.
Yeah, they're still doing the too many questions thing.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. Okay, I love you. Bye-bye. Yeah, no, I'm good.
Right. Yeah, no.
What's great is when you're okay, I've had my fill hanging out with kids. Go home.
Yes. That's what I'm looking forward to being a grandma, because one day, because I can play, I can do my own grandma, my own life stuff, and then I can come over and mess with their kids and get them all riled up and in a bad mood, and then leave. And they deal with it, and it's like payback. Oh yeah. Can you imagine having a cycle of abuse? It's terrible, let me tell you.
My grandparents did the same thing.
Perpetuate the cycle.
My grandparents did the same thing with us.
Yeah, exactly.
Spoil us and be like, sugar. Have fun.
Yes. Throw them in the air a bunch of times so they get sick at their stomach after you've given them, a boatload of sugar, and then let the parents deal with the aftermath. It's only fair. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a long history with abortion. In terms of my position on it, like I started out when I got interested in politics, I got interested through a guy named. Are you familiar with Jello Biafra? He was the front man. Yeah. Okay. For the Dead Kennedys.
Right?
Yeah. He did a lot of spoken word stuff, and that's what kind of get me interested in politics. Like, okay, so politics can be interesting. Then became like a junkie. Then it was through like that I started getting. I was like Green Party. I would like gladly tell people like, yeah, like if I was any more to the left, I'd be a socialist. Like that's how like arrogant I was. But then I started getting like a little bit more moderate when I started listening to people like Al Franken. And then, but there was something like bothering me about economics, like, because I didn't understand it. And there was a lot of things that, like, all these really smart people are saying that it's so, but I mean, that's not really an argument. So there was something like bugging me, like I need to understand what's going on. But I just never looked into it. And it wasn't until I found Penn and Teller's bullshit where I was like, oh, they just did an episode of something I agree with. I think they did an episode about the Bible. And I was like, okay. And then they did one about PETA. I'm like, well, what's wrong with PETA? They're just, okay, maybe they're vegans or whatever, but oh my God, they're funding terrorism.
They're
they kill animals.
People. Yeah. Yes, they kill animals. They're terrible people.
I'm blocked by PETA on Twitter. I love it.
Badge of honor.
Yeah, that is my badge of honor.
That's pretty awesome.
But
yeah, so
it was like,
you came from like the left.
Yeah. They're really California progressive. Like I campaigned for Peter Camayo's gubernatorial runs twice. Once his first
Once
run
was just not enough.
yeah. And then when they did the California recall election, I would have voted for Nader if I was like a month older, because I wasn't going to turn 18 until like the next month.
Well, geez, I as much.
Yeah, I deal
Ralph
with enough
Nader is
adult
not a bad
babies.
dude. Like I like Ralph Nader more than most. Like he seems more genuine than most, politicians anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I could say the same thing with Bernie Sanders, but I don't want them having any sort of reign of power.
Yeah, right. They shouldn't. They should have no power. But like if people say, well, like at least I can work with that. With someone who has seen that the mainstream approved candidates are bullshit. That's at least some common ground, I think.
But it was weird because Penn and Teller's bullshit, like every other episode, was something I agreed with, and then the other one was something I thought I disagreed with, but I couldn't respond to any of that stuff because they made such salient points. There was some of them that turned out to be like a little bit sketchy later, like the secondhand smoke stuff. I think that was probably the only episode where they actually made a big mistake. Well, I mean, at the time, that was the best information that they had. And then like almost right afterwards, some studies were coming out saying like, no, actually, now we have actual evidence to show that secondhand smoke does cause cancer. But I think they were still right about the fundamental question they were arguing, which was, should it be outlawed? No. People should be able to choose. So I was just kind of like, and I was just watching like my whole entire political identity just get demolished every other episode, but reinforced on those other episodes. And I was like, what is this libertarianism thing that they keep talking about? And I started digging more, and I had heard about the Libertarian Party because I don't know if you know, but I'm adopted. So I'm an abortion survivor.
Okay.
I should have known this from the beginning, but like my parents were like, she was like 6, my biological mother was like 16. I've never met her. And from what I understood, like she didn't want to have me, but her family was religious. And so they were like, no, we're going to put it up for adoption. And my parents adopted me. My sister was also adopted, but from a different family. And both of them are from the same family, but they ended up getting in contact with their biological father. And he was almost like part of the household up until recently, but we're not going to get into that.
That's cool.
And he was telling me like, oh yeah, I used to run for office under the Libertarian Party, and so there was always like, I knew that they were a thing, I just didn't know what they believed. And I thought it was kind of cool because now I can understand that economics part of it, and it started making more sense. But I still get to keep all of the really cool things that I still thought were right, like letting people get gay married or an abortion and stuff like that. Well, I guess abortion's about 50-50 in libertarianism, gay married, whatever. So, legalizing weed and all that stuff.
Right.
So I started getting a little bit more radicalized, and then fucking Murray Rothbard tricked me into becoming an ANCAP, which I'm not going to get into that. Fucking tricked me. Which I'm fine with in retrospect. But at the time, I was like, you motherfucker. After I was done reading the book, I was like, you motherfucker. Because I used to argue with
Anatomy of the
ANCAPs.
State?
No, it was For New Liberty.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I just got some dude that was telling me about, it sort of reminds me of this. Today online, we had a little conversation about the Constitution, and he was like, but our constitutional republic, blah, blah, blah. And I threw some Spooner down, and he's like, oh, I need to maybe read this guy. I'm like, yes, you do. Just know that once you see, you cannot unsee. So we'll see what fruit comes from that. But kind of the same thing. Once you read no treason, it's kind of you might disagree with him, but you're always going to be arguing against his points.
5 months later. Yeah, I didn't sign shit.
3,000 years later. Yeah.
Yep.
I think that's great. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's fine. That's what this show's about.
Interruptions. Okay, then.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure I interrupted. But this whole time that I've been a libertarian, probably up until the last, I want to say 4 years or so, I was, so Trump. So yeah, about 6 years. About the time Trump got elected, or actually when we started the show was 2014. So no, yeah, it would have, geez.
It's
8
longer.
years. Yeah, 8 years. But there was a good long period where I was on the fence because for most of that time I was like, oh no, it's a woman's right to choose. You can't regulate a woman's literal vagina. That's fucked up.
Right.
But I never really addressed the fundamental issue, which was is the thing that you're taking out of that woman its own separate entity?
Right.
And does it have rights? Is it okay to kill something? And I was like, once I started having to grapple with that, I was kind of like, okay, I don't know where I need to sit on this. And I started arguing with some of the ex co-hosts of this stuff. And I remember there was one particular episode that I did where I was bringing up like, well, if it's a human life and we're talking about killing it, isn't that like a violation of the NAP? And not that we're not going to get into the whole discussion about the NAP, and I don't think it's an axiom, but that aside, I was like, doesn't that violate, that? And he was like, well, even if it does, I mean, you're still like breaking the NAP by enforcing it. And I was like, well, wouldn't it? And it like at that moment, that's when I started getting off the fence and I started becoming more anti-abortion because I was like, that is a terrible argument because you can use that for any property rights violation, anyone. Oh yeah, sure. Like you could stop murder or whatever, but you'd still be violating the rights of the murderers by stopping them from murder. Like what? Even same with rape, burglaries. Of course, yeah, because once you give up those rights when you're violating those rules, then all cards are off the table for you.
It's a slippery slope.
Yeah. So just kind of like that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I started coming off. And I want to say about 4 years ago or so, that's when I was like, yeah, I'm just anti-abortion. I think this is bad. I don't believe that life begins at conception. I haven't seen any real evidence for that. I think heartbeat is a good metric, but I still want to be overly cautious about that because what if we now know that there actually is like an actual life in there? It's actually separate from the mother that we can prove scientifically down the line. Does that mean that all the babies that were destroyed before then were actually now murdered? It's like I want to be like ultra careful with this. So I still think plan B is fine, but I think that's probably my line. Like, really. Yeah because I mean there are plenty of
eggs that get fertilized that don't implant in the uterus. You have to have that uterine wall lining implantation for it to really start the process. So yeah, I think we basically, I'm on the same wavelength with you. I err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
Right. I can't tell you when life begins, and I don't think anyone can. I think there are arguments to be made about heartbeat or brain activity. But I certainly want to err on the side of caution. And I was sort of on the same, kind of fence for a while because I thought, well, gosh, I don't like it, but these are competing interests, right? You get the competing interest of the woman and the competing interest of the child, and then the competing interest of the father, which is often left out of that. The
father is the one that's really gets screwed because all those abortion rights come with no abortion rights for men. Like there's no male abortion, which if we're gonna have abortion, we should at least have male abortion. But they're gonna be like, well, I don't want to have the kid, so you're on your own. If we're gonna have that, you got to have the other, but they don't want that. It's
make room for a womb. Yeah,
takes two to tango. You're responsible. You need to own up and take responsibility. Oh, me? No, I'm getting it taken out of me. I'm killing it.
And that's the thing that always when people, I think it's so emotionally charged. I hardly talk about it at all online because it's too difficult. People are just talking past each other most of the time, and they're using phrases that, "Well, just close your legs. We'll just put it up for adoption," and those are very kind of flippant ways to put it. And then, of course, the pro-abortion people are always the edge cases, the 10-year-old that's raped or whatever, which are terrible things. And yes, if someone's raped, is it still murder? Well, yeah, but they're not responsible for that moral injury, in my opinion. Like, if they get an abortion, of course, it's the rapist's responsibility. So that's kind of off the table regardless, because I think everybody thinks it's okay in cases of rape. But in cases where, two people got together and did what two people do, there's been the phrase for a long time that there is, personal responsibility. You have to have that in order to have freedom. Like, you can't have freedom without personal responsibility. And, I've seen people I respect arguing that, you should be able to abandon your children, which I don't believe either, because do you have positive rights? No, not in a state of whatever, but once you obligate yourself by your actions, of course you do. I don't have, in my mind, I don't have the right to make a child, have it, and then leave it on the side of the road. I have a responsibility to that life, and it might not be to raise it, but like to give it up for adoption, to take it to, they have all these, at the firehouses and stuff, you can leave babies now and things. Hospitals, yeah. So there's no reason, like, why would you cause harm to something that or to anything? I think I would have an obligation to a child, just anyone, because I think there's sort of I don't know if obligation's the word, but life is precious, and I think it should be protected
I think human
as
life
much
is
as possible.
Precious. I think human life
human
is
life. Yes, human
I will
life.
strangle
Yes, it's a good distinction
100 dolphins to save one baby. I would.
Right?
As much as I hate kids and I hate babies, I would do that. But just go away after you're done. Saved your life. You don't need to thank me. No, don't hug me. You're sticky. You're covered in
like,
your saliva and candy. Get out right away.
You pass it off to someone here. Take this baby. I just it's disgusting me.
Yeah.
Right.
So take it to the firehouse. Take it to the hospital. Right. No questions asked.
Yeah, exactly. What people do, though, like, you are responsible for those things you set in action, in motion. And I believe that. And I know there are people who argue with that, but we either live in a world where you want people to be responsible for the things they do, or you don't. And I'm an anarchist, but I believe in personal responsibility to the nth degree, because you don't get to just leave I won't let my kids leave their mess around for someone else to clean up. You don't get to just do that. You get to, if you don't want to raise your baby, fine, get it to someone who does. There are plenty of people that will take that baby in. But I think would be a terrible person. And I think a lot of these people that argue this stuff, they're talking in technicalities. It's like to me, Phariseeism. I don't know how familiar you are with Christianity. But
I was a Baptist when I was really little, and then I read the Bible.
So the Pharisees.
When I read the Bible, I was like, well, that's a bunch of bullshit.
And you flicked your cigarette onto the playground. You can just see you as like a 7-year-old.
One of my favorite Zach Galifianakis jokes was like, sometimes I like to read the Bible in public and then just randomly spout out, "Oh, bullshit."
That's great. Yeah. But that whole thing to me is like, it's the letter of the law, right? You don't have any positive obligations. Well, no, but when you obligate yourself by your actions, yes, you do. So I just don't, I don't track with that. And I don't, I don't want to live in that world either, but this is my, like I was saying before, for a long time, I was on the fence as well, because I thought, well, this is just an issue that libertarianism doesn't answer well. There are some issues that It's really good at answering, but not this one. And I was talking with our mutual friend Patrick, actually, in his living room. I went down to visit.
Which I have a note to mention. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we got to talking about it, and he's the one who actually changed my mind, because I wanted a reason.
Abortion is murder. Change my mind.
We need the sign. Yeah. But I can't remember even exactly what he said to me, but I do remember having this conversation with him. And, to me, it comes down to property rights and self-ownership, like everything else. And, people say, well, it's a part of the mother, whatever. But when you abort, when you murder this baby, this fetus, if you will, it doesn't kill the mother. Like, they're clearly separate entities, right? So I think it's something that I really don't care for the state to be regulating. I don't want that. I still think it's sticky in that way, because I think what people don't often talk about either are all the targeting of abortion towards certain communities, and all of the trouble, economic and otherwise, that the state has inserted itself into and caused all these problems that make people even want to do that. I don't think that's generally the natural thought of most women, to get rid of their babies, unless they're in a bad situation. Most of them. I mean, we're not talking about the lady who I had 45 abortions and I'm proud of it. Those kill the little effers woman too. That one. Those people are sick, and I think most people who are even pro abortion would think they're sick.
Or how will I do cream pie videos on chat roulette now?
Ugh. Yeah. So. Are you okay over there?
Oh God!
But like those are people.
I saw a meme about that one. Where it was like, what was it, Ned Flanders, or the church lady in The Simpsons? She was like, "Think of the cream pie videos."
Oh my God! Wow. There's a market for everything out there. Yes. I'm saying.
There's a market for, including babies.
Oh man, we're going to. If there was a hell, we'd be going there.
No, not for sexual. No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying people who want to adopt, they should be able to buy kids.
Right, okay, just buy children on the open market.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if people could talk about it with less emotion, it'd be good. Because look, abortion's been around for a long, long time. Like probably maybe 1,000 years, a long time. I think there's records of that. So it's not like it's not
for as long
always
as stairs have been invented. Yes.
For as long as what have been invented? Stairs.
Stairs.
Oh God. Oh gosh. Yeah. Whew. But I think
fell.
it was always. Yeah. Oh. She just fell. I swear.
Didn't you, honey? She stopped being so clumsy. That got really dark really fast. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's like my childhood all over again. No. But yeah, so I think it's it's a highly charged issue, which it should be. We're talking about human life, like that Louis C.K. joke. I love it when he talks about all these weirdo pro-lifers. They think you're murdering babies, but you are murdering babies. It's something like that. And he has such a great way of doing that. But it matters, and I think you want to hear what people have to say on the other side, but people are just so, because of state interjection into this issue, it's made it much worse. I mean, we know that the state messes everything up. So I think the state being involved in it at all, from what I understand, it was part of, what was it, Nixon's Southern plan
strategy?
Or something?
Southern
Southern
strategy
strategy to get Southern Democrats who are not they're Democrats because they're like union, they want unions, or they want certain social programs. They're not like the leftist type liberals, right? They're Southern Democrats, which is a bit different, and they're religious. And so if we can get an issue that gets them locked in to our position, we'll take the South. And they did, and it's been people not really listening since then. And I think it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And then now you have the people who are just hysterical about a decision that it puts it back in the hands of the states, which you're talking about federalism is where it always should have been in the first place.
Yeah.
So I think you even have Ruth Bader Ginsburg said it was a terrible decision.
Well, she didn't say it was a terrible decision. She said it was on very shaky ground and that it was up to the legislature of the federal government to codify it into law. So the Democrats had 50 years
and they didn't
to do something about it. And they were like, nah, it's cool. Supreme Court got it. It's not like the Supreme Court ever overturns any of their previous decisions. Like, I don't know, yelling fire in a crowded theater or anything.
Right.
Nothing has ever been overturned.
Right.
Oh.
Right. I think it's really interesting too, because for me, this is what I thought when I heard about it. I was like, wow, I'm surprised either side is going for this, because they both use it as a wedge issue, right? Like, this is what keeps so many people entrenched. I mean, this is why a lot of people wouldn't join the Libertarian Party even, because it had the pro-abortion, to some people, that platform. And it's become just that important to people that it's their one issue. And I was really just shocked that it happened, because I know that the Republicans want it to keep it an issue just as much as the Democrats do, because they make a lot of hay off of it. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm surprised.
I still think that the Libertarian Party should remain completely don't talk about it. Like, in terms of like the party itself, the candidates maybe differently, but the party itself should remain completely agnostic about abortion and just go like, it's up to the candidates until there's like been some shift one way or the other, like where the vast majority of them will agree. And I think the tide is definitely going the other way, at least in the libertarian community. I know that the tide is changing the other way, but people still look at the polls. But the polls are, when they talk about abortion, the polls basically ask two ways. They say, or they ask three different questions. Like, do you think it should be not allowed at all, allowed with some restrictions, or allowed with no restrictions? So even people who are like, well, I'm against abortion, once there's a heartbeat, which is like, 5 weeks? And I think we need to err on the side of caution. So probably not within like the first few weeks. I think that should be allowed. That would fall into that category, and that's the one that gets the most. And so people look at that and go like, well, most people agree with abortions. Well, it's like, well, no.
Not really.
It's a very vague question. And pollsters know this. There's a guy named Frank Luntz, which, by the way, fuck you, Frank. Frank Luntz talks about how like polling isn't necessarily, it's not all science. There's a bit of artistry to it. And there's an episode of Bullshit where he's in there, where that's where fuck you, Frank comes in, which, by the way, fuck you, Frank. Where he talks to someone, he says like, should we spend more or less money on immigrants who come to America in terms of social services? And everyone goes, oh no, we should spend way less. They're like, okay, would you deny the children of illegal immigrants access to health care? Oh, no, they should be allowed to have. Okay, what about schooling? And they would ask them like the individual issues, and everybody was like, oh no, don't deny them that. No, don't deny illegal immigrants this policy, this policy, this policy. And then he'd be like, okay, so you're for this, you're for that, you're for this. What exactly, like, do you still agree that we should spend more money? And then they would go, yeah, I think it's fine the way it is. And then so he can turn around and go like, more people say yes. But there is some artistry to polling. It's not
definitely.
it's not complete science.
You might be disappointed in this, but I've actually done some phone bank work for a certain Koch brothers organization.
Oh no.
This was years ago when I was still under the delusion that, we had to be involved in the political system in order to change things or whatever. So, but yes, there's a lot of artistry within it because they're very, very careful to word it a certain way and make sure that you ask it exactly as they've written it. Mm-hmm. So, because it's all political theater, right? Like we know this, and there are people who make a lot of money figuring those things out and how to ask those questions to kind of lead the person as well as skew the answers in the end.
But there are some polls where you can kind of say, okay, this makes a whole lot more sense if you ask them, like, what political candidate are you going to vote for? Those sorts of questions, something that's very straightforward. Whereas when you talk about like, where there's only like 3 answers on an abortion question, that people are all over the map when it comes to what they view as abortion, whether you're anti or pro-abortion. So to put in those 3 categories, you're gonna have to start going like, okay, what would this classify? What would my position classify under? But then I could still say, am I this? Do I know somebody else who has a position that differs from me, but would still fall under that same category? That's when you have to start going like, okay, maybe there's something wrong here.
Right.
I think the tide is definitely turning. I do notice there's a lot of people that I used to follow who were definitely pro-abortion who are starting to back off from it. And they're doing it in the same way that I did for many years, where they're kind of like sitting on the fence, like, I don't know. Something's not right. It just takes the right question. And I have to give all the credit to Seamus Coughlin, excuse me, for kind of like helping me move in that right direction. He was always talking to me about it. A lot of times when we were doing the show, because he knew that I was sitting on the fence. And so he was giving me all the arguments, and I would relay some of those arguments to like some of my pro-abortion co-hosts. And I was just getting like really bad answers. But if you really want to hear like a good case for, for the anti-abortion or abortion is murder case, like Patrick, and I'll put a link in the description in the show notes once this episode comes out tomorrow morning, or now if you're listening on the RSS feed or not live. I'll put a link to his video he did. It's like 3 hours long. I ended up going through the whole thing and timestamping all of the arguments that people constantly give for the pro side, where they address every single argument for it. And so I have the pinned comment on it.
Patrick's the best at that stuff, at like breaking down the philosophy.
Yeah, I have some disagreements with his philosophy, but we're still friends. And he gives me shit every once in a while, and I'll just be like, just get off my flagpole.
Right. Yeah. Good old Friedman. It's, and then that's the thing. Like, I think Patrick and most other, other people, if you're coming in good faith to actually have philosophical and not emotional arguments, then you can talk. Like, they'll talk to you. That's respectable. It's the problem is with this, everybody's looking at the other side as the caricature of who they are, and they're not really like, I mean, I believe it's murder. I don't want people having abortions. I also don't want the state regulating crap like that. And if there were no state, I probably wouldn't even know about people having abortions, but there certainly wouldn't be, Planned Parenthood targeting minority communities and things like that. So I'm gonna defend Planned Parenthood a little bit, even though they deserve none, especially after all the states, especially after all of the states that banned abortion. They left town. But it's like, wait a minute, I thought only 3% of your income's coming from that. Why are you? What the fuck? You flying sack of shit. Right.
But I will say that I think it's not really so much that they were initially definitely targeting that. Margaret Sanger was very much eugenicist who thought Black people were subhuman, and so she targeted those areas. But I think that the culture is so much there in those communities that that's where the demand is, and so they go where the demand is. Not so much the other way around now. I think a lot of people who work there have good but very ill-guided like intentions.
Sure.
But it is kind of gross if you actually
Yeah.
but this is also the same group of people who will go like, well, that may be like what's happening, but that's not the intention, so it's fine. Meanwhile, anything else that goes wrong for the African American community in any way, shape, or form, well, that's systematic.
Right.
Like it's systematic racism. Well, what about Planned Parenthood and abortion? How come? Well, no, that's different. It's like, well, no. There either is this concept called systemic,
Right.
systematic,
Yeah.
so it'd be systemic. It's not intentional. So systematic racism, and it applies to abortion or it doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't exist at all across the board.
I mean, that's what so many people, that's where consistency has to matter, right? You have to be consistent. And so most people aren't, though. And that's the problem when you get into something like this. Like like you said, why would they leave when, they're providing health care to these women, not just, I can't forget, they provide like tests for STDs and birth control and things like that. But they just abandoned these women that are apparently have no other help whatsoever. Like that's the way the left talks about them, as if they're completely helpless and there's nothing else they can do. And if they can't get abortions, then how are they going to not have babies? Like there are ways, ladies. I don't know what to tell you. And men too. Like it's women, and this is an argument that is true. Women pay the biggest price for unplanned pregnancies, no doubt. That's why, as women, we have to be more discerning about what we're doing, because it's a lot harder for a dude to get saddled with a baby than you.
Women have 16 different. Last I checked, there was 16 different options for birth control for them. Only one of them is abortion.
Sure,
and men have
terrible.
2, which is abstinence and condoms. And that's it.
Yeah.
So
neither of those are very satisfying, I will admit. Yeah,
yes.
I would love to see developments in that area, because I think there's a lot of men who would say, I would love to be able to take a pill that would keep my sperm from, impregnating some chick, that I don't really want to have a baby with.
Well, I guess there's vasectomy, but I don't. That's technically permanent. It's possibly reversible, but for all intents and purposes, it's permanent. They consider it permanent just because there might be complications restoring it. So.
Right, and scar tissue is a big thing and could affect that. So even if they do the reversal surgery, it doesn't mean it will work. So yeah, I think there's, whenever you take out the personal responsibility from something, then it's easy to make tons of excuses for why it's okay. And I'm not saying that people aren't in bad situations and that a baby is not what they need. I'm not saying any of that, but I am saying that I don't think it's okay to just discard a human life because you made a mistake. That's my opinion. Again, whenever you take it's going to make some people angry. I generally
sorry.
Try and
I ended up accidentally opening up the YouTube stream and it played back. So can you say that one more time?
I was just saying, I don't think you have the right to discard a human life because it's inconvenient to you when you went through the motions of setting that life on course. So I think it is a symptom of a greater problem in our, society, to sound like some moralizer. But where, there is a, personal responsibility is just not a thing that is very common for a lot of people. They don't think about their responsibility to themselves and their families and their communities beyond what they want in the moment. And, I'm responsible for the things I do in the world. And I've taught my children they're responsible for the things they do in the world. I haven't cleaned either of my kids' rooms since they were old enough to do it themselves. Like they started learning. I started teaching them, these are your things and you're responsible for them. If we go somewhere, they carry their own crap. Like they've been doing that since they were little. But people expect kids to just grow up and all of a sudden reach some magic number where they're all of a sudden responsible, but they don't teach them that. And so I think this is all sort of a symptom of that kind of thinking that a lot of people have, where, oh, they'll grow out of it. No, they fucking won't grow out of it. That's what parents are for, right? They're to guide and to teach and to coach. So I really kind of abhor that mentality of, well, I'm just going to set you loose, you feral child, on the rest of the world, and I hope everything works out. Like, I don't know. Have you seen that? This is kind of getting off subject. Have you seen that show Snowflake Mountain or something like that?
Snowflake Mountain?
Yeah, it's on
What is
Netflix.
this about, Tumblr?
No, I don't know what that means. About Tumblr. No. Isn't that gone now? Is Tumblr a thing still?
Well, they got rid of porn and then everybody else got left with it. And they came to Twitter. Now they're infecting Twitter. That's why Twitter is so woke now.
Oh, okay.
Tumblr went away, unfortunately.
All right. Well, it's a show where people, they have these like young adults. They're in their early 20s. And they still live at home, and they're pampered, and they're all the the caricatures of millennials. They're entitled. They feel like everybody is against them if they don't get what they want. And so they get tricked into go into this. I don't know how much of it's true. It's a reality show, so but the thing is, these two guys that are like former Navy SEAL or some stupid shit like that. They have them go through these tasks, and you just see this whole sort of, I didn't do my job as a parent, and so now I'm going to drop you off somewhere and expect someone else to do it for you, and I'm going to blame you the whole time. You're entitled, but it's nothing I did. I didn't give you everything you want and helicopter you and never allow you to make any mistakes or schedule your own life, but it's all your fault. And that's really what it is. Like, people do this all the time with their kids. They'll drop them off at a psychiatrist or some kind of therapist and say, fix them. But they don't want to take any responsibility for, the wreck that they've raised. Yeah. And I blame the boomers.
I blame the boomers.
Yeah, oh God. Yeah. There's so much to be said there, but a lot of Gen X too, because I think one of the worst things you can do for kids is helicopter them and have them scheduled every moment of the day, and just never let them have a task that is their own and that they can do and accomplish something and be proud of, or fail at it or whatever, but let them take on their life, and you've got to teach them how to do that. But do it, like, be a parent and do what you're supposed to do. These people don't do that, and then they expect everybody else to sort of pick up the pieces. So I think abortion has become like, it's one area where people go, well, gosh, these people, these 14-year-olds got together and made a baby, and they didn't know. I don't know a 14-year-old in this fucking country that doesn't know that having sex leads to babies. You've had what, 30 years or what, however long of sex education in public schools, and teaching people how to put on condoms and all sort of stuff. And then, you're just saying what a failure you are if that's the case. Like, how incompetent your programs are if 14-year-olds today don't know what leads to pregnancy.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Couldn't have said it better. No, perfect.
I get so upset about this stuff.
Yeah, I really do blame the boomers. Like, you don't understand how deep my hatred for the boomer generation is. I mean, my parents were a little bit different because they weren't involved. They were sort of involved with it, but they never got into the bad parts of it. So, are you familiar with a writer by the name of Hunter S. Thompson?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Probably my favorite author of all time.
Okay.
One of his books probably turned into one of my favorite movies of all time, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Right.
Though probably like the first part of his career, from Rum Diaries, but he didn't release it until later. So like from Hell's Angels to about like the Great White Shark Hunt. I forget what that last book is called. That period right there is when he was writing really good stuff. And then after that, he was writing like schlock, because I think he had imposter syndrome later in his life. Anyways, for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, I think people watch that movie and they read that book and they just walk away going like, man, that was really funny that he was doing all these drugs and doing really shitty things. Ha ha ha. And that's kind of that's the way I saw it the first time I watched it in like high school. I was like, whoa, it's crazy. Look at all the drugs they're doing.
Right.
But it wasn't until like later in life after I read the book, which didn't really add much to it because they did such a faithful adaptation of that movie to the book. But when I started like getting really like interested in like this whole thing, I started realizing like what the central theme was, because I kept hearing like it was an interview someone did where he asked him like, did you ever find the American Dream? And he was like, yeah, that's why it's called The Great American Story. Did you read the book? Did you watch the movie? And they were like, oh, I don't understand. And I was like, okay, so I need to understand what this is all about. And so I started going through it again, and I was actually paying attention to the parts where I kind of just glazed over with boredom when he was talking. And I was like, oh my God, this is actually really profound, which he talks about like how the countercultural movement came in and they had so much energy. The baby boomers came in. They pretty much stopped the war. They had so much, good going for them, maybe though their politics may have been misguided. But they were definitely a kind of force against this kind of conservative war machine that was happening at the time.
Right.
And then all of a sudden that wave rolled back. And if you look out on the Vegas skyline, you can actually see the high water mark. That's what he said in the book. And he was like, what the hell happened? And why did the American dream die with that? The whole the concept of the American dream died with that. And then he started doing more drugs and everything. And he started looking around at the casinos and seeing like all these used car salesmen, trying to grab at that American dream. And he realized that it was the drugs. It was the fucking drugs that fucking killed it. Because it was Timothy Leary, the tune in, turn on, drop out thing.
Right. Drop out. Right.
Yeah. He told everybody like, you can find peace and understanding for $3 a hit. But but all of these people fell into the mystic fallacy that there's some force or some thing tending the light at the end of the tunnel, and there's not.
Right.
And so now you have a whole generation of cripples, and now these people are in charge of the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
well, at
really
the time,
interesting.
They weren't, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Like in the Merry Pranksters and all that with Timothy Leary. This sort of idea that you can just, I mean, I'm pretty much a free spirit in a lot of ways. Even though I talk a lot about personal responsibility, like I like to do what I want when I want. I'm highly motivated by fun. But there's an emptiness in that, and and so I think this is where I really like Jordan Peterson, is in this category. You say what you will about it with other things, but I think when there's no responsibility, when there's no purpose for your life, and as a libertarian anarchist, I believe that you determine what that purpose is, right? You get to chart your own course. But I think what the boomer generation sold everyone was that shirk your responsibility, man. You don't need that. Yeah. And really that's what gives you purpose and makes it's kind of like, is it Boogie Nights, where it's one of the movies where maybe it's Blow. I think it's Blow, where they're, at the beginning, and probably Boogie Nights too, they're having their fun. It's all great. And then by the end, it's all just, ashes. It's turned to ashes. Yep. And I think that's the whole thing is that, I as a anarchist, I believe people should be able to put in their bodies and do to their bodies what they choose, within the bounds of harming others, not harming others. But is that going to be your best life? Probably not.
Nope.
I've seen dudes that, split their tongues, split their penises, and, put all these rings and stuff in themselves and do all sorts of things. And are they really happy? They can never get in, like they never stop. Because, and I think this is, if you want to get in the trans thing, I think that's, part of it too, is that people are sold that there's a cure that is going to make them feel 100% great. And their life will be fine after that. And it's just not true. Everything takes work. Life takes work constantly. And, I like to do some drugs. Like, I'm not a person who says don't do any drugs, but I am a person who says be responsible and, don't think that that's going to change your life always for the better. Like I, mushrooms, I like those. And I think they saved my life. I really do. I'm convinced that they did. But I treat them with respect. Like
You use
it's
them,
like
you don't abuse them, is what you're saying.
yes. And so, I think a lot of times people get in over their heads, or they think just because it's okay for me to do something that it has no consequences. And I mean, we all know people who are burned out stoners, like,
Yep.
And that's the mildest thing you can probably put in your body that is considered a drug, maybe besides caffeine. I don't know. But you can even overdo that,
Yep.
And so it's about finding that purpose in your life, the things that make you want to get up every morning, the people that bring you joy, the things that bring you joy, and investing in your own life enough to where those things are just accents. They're not your whole life. And I know people that I really like that drugs are their life.
Yep.
That's what they live for. And it's kind of sad.
I can name names. Derek Rose.
Right,
Yeah.
And it's like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I'm not going to tell you what you should do with yourself. I might, as a friend, say to you, hey, I think you're going off the rails here. And I think that's what someone who loves you should do. I hear a lot of times, like, anarchists, those try and say, you don't tell me what to do. Like, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm trying to help you, point out to you that maybe.
Am I being detained?
Right. I'm not forcing you. Yeah. So there's a difference in caring about someone and saying, hey, is this really what you want to be doing with your life? And calling the cops on somebody like that. There's the difference. And I think a lot of people are seeing that. There's a lot of, you and I aren't spiritual, but there are a lot of people in the movement who are.
I am, but I am an atheist.
Right. Okay.
You know I'm a Satanist, right? You
yeah.
got that? Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's not that. Well, I'm spiritual, not religious. Not like no, I'm religious.
Right.
And spiritual.
Straight up.
Just an atheist.
Throwing the horns. I've looked into it quite a bit myself. I respect do they call them tenets of Satanism?
Yeah.
I don't know what I respect those. They're very libertarian.
Yeah. I do have some disagreements with the Church of Satan proper. I mean, they're very much pro-abortion, and I'm like, wait, what about number 9, buddy? Do not harm little children.
Oh, yeah.
What about that one?
The littlest of children. Yeah. I think it's just, it's kind of anti-science to look at it as only a clump of cells. Like, it's my understanding from people who actually work with cells.
You're a clump of cells. We're all just a bunch of clump of cells.
Clump of cells, right. But like, that's the argument. Well, it's just a clump of cells. And the difference is a clump of cells in a petri dish in a lab isn't headed anywhere. An implanted zygote or egg of a woman, a fertilized one, is headed somewhere. There's a biological chain that's starting there, and there's a big difference. Created.
There's already the propensity for what the baby is going to look like, how smart the baby's going to be, propensity to mental illness, all that stuff. It's all there.
Right.
It's on that
incredible.
track. Yeah. And
that's. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like. And I heard a lot of people like, well, when does actually personhood begin? It's like, well, that doesn't matter, because whatever definition you can, there's going to be like edge cases where you can say, well, what about someone in a coma that would fall into that same category, or a small. It's like, why is that narrow 3 inches canal? Why is that passage the official like cutoff line where you go, okay, then that's not okay.
Right.
When exactly is it? When exactly do they gain personhood? You have to treat it like they're in the process of doing. Even if you did a test and it found they determined that this baby is 100% going to have Down syndrome, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not ever going to be a rights respecting individual. Because there are people who have Down syndromes who can actually function as a normal adult.
Absolutely.
They're just stunted. There are people, and you don't even know the odds of that. So,
right.
Yeah.
and there's plenty of cases where people were told one thing and then their babies are born fine too. Or not nearly as bad off as they were told. Because, prognosis and diagnosis are different.
Yeah.
And people forget that a lot of times. Like, you can diagnose something, but you can't always, a doctor can tell you you have cancer and they can give you the prognosis that you have 6 months to live, but they're not in control of that. They don't know that for sure. It's an educated guess, and that's what it should be looked like as. And so, it's sort of the same with the feti. But I remember Glenn, what's his face? The white-haired guy, conservative, Glenn Beck. Yes, Glenn Beck. Years ago, when I used to be of that persuasion and I was a talk radio junkie, I was listening to Glenn Beck. I was watching a show, and he has a daughter with Down syndrome. And he made the most beautiful speech, basically, about why these lives are precious. Because, a lot of people were just saying, well, you shouldn't, bring a child into the world knowing it's sick as an excuse for abortion. Like, and he was saying the joy, the overwhelming love and goodness that his daughter with Down syndrome has brought into the world is, you can't put a value on that. Like, that's a person, and I'm not romanticizing all people with Down syndrome, but I think if you've ever known someone with Down syndrome, my cousin has
Down syndrome, so.
Okay, yeah. That's kind of how they are. A lot of people with Down syndrome are just, there's no guile. There's not any, they wouldn't harm anything in them. Like, there's just a goodness that is inspirational, so I'm not, trying to say there's not issues there. It is a hard life to live. But
I'm retarded.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, and I know that's a very gross generalization of a broad issue, but I've known quite a few people with Down syndrome growing up through my life, and mostly they are inspiring just because they're so kind and loving and gentle, and so I would hate to say that there's no value to someone that has those issues. And I mean, if there was one argument I think that makes me take a second, is there a God? It's the human body and how nature in of itself is developed, and how things grow, and it's miraculous. It's amazing. And I think we, like you said, we kind of have to, if we don't have a specific day, on this day they are human, this is where consciousness and life begins, I think you just have to err on the side of caution.
I think it's always gonna be fuzzy. There's never gonna be at this particular second, I don't think there's ever gonna be that. There's gonna be definitely a gray area in that middle.
Right.
But I still don't want to. I want to err on the side of caution and put it before that gray area starts, whatever that gray area is.
Yes. I guess a lot of this too is just letting go of the fact that in the anarchist world that I would prefer, I'm not going to have control over all of these things, and I'm not responsible for every moral injury that people do to themselves or to their unfortunate offspring, or they're not offspring, right? At that point, so I can't, I just can't sit around and be concerned about every bad thing people are going to do. Like, bad things are going to happen all the time, always. And abortion's just one of the many bad things that I think, will continue to happen. It's just, you want to create a world where people have more opportunity to choose better.
Yeah.
Do better.
Yeah. So yeah, it was an arduous march for me to come to where I was on anti-abortion.
Yeah.
And it was rough, and a lot of it kind of, there was also like this pressure, and there was definitely this pressure at the beginning of the Lolberts, and I'm sure like a lot of people have seen this progression from me, where I was trying to be as positive as I could to the woke crowd as much as I could. But I remember that moment where that ended for me. And that was when I had a friend of mine who I haven't talked to in a while on YouTube make a video about some transgender issue. And like, I still think that his point was wrong. And I was just like, I think you're wrong about this particular one. And that's not to say that, I agree with all the super wokeness around it. I think that this particular thing that you're talking about, like, I think it's fine that people can feel like there's something that they're not, even if I have no understanding what that feeling would be like. Like, you can ask me, like, what does it feel like to be a man? Well, it's like, well, I feel manly when I do a lot of things. What if I never had that feeling? Maybe I would feel the other way. I don't know. I don't know what that experience is. I can't really say. And just because I don't have any personal experience with it, that was basically the thesis of my video. That, and there actually is an entry in the DSM for gender dysphoria.
Right.
And I had some woke and communist guy try to like paint me as some like transphobe. Like, oh, he's saying it's a mental illness. And I was like, okay, so I got the terminology wrong. Is there anything like factually that I said that was incorrect? Like something evil that I said? And there was even like some people, like his fans, that were like, I think you went overboard with this one. I think you should let it slide. It was like I don't think he said any, like he may have misspoke about things, but whatever. That's when I was like, I'm done. I'm fucking done coddling these people. I'm done. At all.
Because you're coming to it in good faith, but they don't care about that. They want to, if you don't just, because it is about power for a lot of these people, not necessarily the trans people themselves, because I believe trans people are used as, the pawns in this whole thing.
Cardboard cutouts.
Yes, for
they're like Native Americans.
People.
Yeah, they're like Native Americans.
Yes. They're unimpressive people to have social power over others. And what happens is you're trying to talk about, I think most people in this country today want to have these conversations with people, but are so afraid of those types, the woke types, painting them and just, shouting them down basically with their words. They care more about the specific, controlling the specific words you use than actually listening to what you're trying to say. Yeah. And I don't think that's even a majority of what we would call liberals. I think there's a certain segment of the woke, what people would call the woke crowd, that is their raison d'etre is to be special because of how virtuous they are to that ideology and how wrong they can make everyone else. And, I don't know if you saw this, but Bill Maher, did you see his little segment about was
He's
brilliant.
Absolutely right.
Oh my gosh. And he did another one recently, and I was messaging my ex-husband, and I were messaging back and forth about these. I'm like, oh my God, can you believe how on fire Maher is?
Look, I'm going to defend Maher. I'm going to defend Maher because I do like Bill Maher, even though I disagree with them a lot. I think even when I disagree with them, I still find his jokes funny. Like, he has really perfect timing, and he's very quick. Like, he's one of those people where he could think of a joke. Even if you don't agree with it, you'll be like, okay, that was funny. Yeah, it's wrong, but it's funny. Yeah. But
he's clearly intelligent and thoughtful, even if he's wrong.
Yeah, but he's never been a part of this woke stuff. He has always been like kind of like a 1980s Democrat. He's always has been like that. And he never moved with the times. And I remember even when I was a progressive, I would watch him and I'd be like, why is he like shilling for like these right-wing positions sometimes? I don't understand it. But so when I watch him now, there's a lot of times where I'm like, he fucking got it. He understands this. Yeah. And then like the next thing, and be like, oh, God, you fucking shut up, Mar.
Right. Yeah. But I think at least there's logic. Like, I can accept and respect anyone who has like the abortion issue. I don't think that they have no arguments on the other side. I just think that in the end, it's a life, and you just can't dispose of life because it's inconvenient. I think someone in a certain time period in Germany tried to do those things, and that's not right. It's not ever right. And so I won't argue
Soviets
that
too. The
there
Soviets did the same thing. They
Yeah,
were more
exactly.
successful too.
Right. And so, I see it as sort of the same kind of thought about human life, is that some people are disposable. And in my opinion, people are not disposable. And
Well,
unless through their actions they make them, like, if you're a
Democratic
freaking
senators,
child rapist,
yeah.
a politician, child rapist. Oh, same thing.
Same
Sorry.
thing. Yeah. They're satanic pedophiles running the country. That's crazy talk.
Yeah.
I remember when that was crazy talk like 5 years ago.
I remember too.
Yeah.
Yep. I know. And then, what?
I think people like give Jones too much credit when they say that, like, he's been right. Maybe we should have been listening to him all along. It's like, no, he's not that he's been right. Right. Because I mean, if you keep making like predictions every day, like terrible predictions every day, something's going to stick. Yeah. And he does that a lot. So occasionally a lot of them stick. It's just that the media has just been so wrong because they're digging their heels into their ideology so much so that they're completely blind, and they're making these predictions and these conclusions that are factually wrong. If you did some minor digging, and when he does some minor digging, he'll go like, yeah, something about the virus, something, it came from somewhere. I don't want to say it because I don't want to get hit with YouTube stuff. But you're like, right. And then you're like, well, but then he'll go on to say it's all part of the New World Order conspiracy, lizard or interdimensional beings. Right. It's like, okay, that part's crap, but he got that first part right, and then people go like, well, he got that right. Well, sort of. It's not that he was right. I mean, anybody with that information could have come to that conclusion. It's just, why did all the other outlets get it so wrong for so long? Well,
this is something I've often thought. If we're talking about conspiracies, I think becoming an anarchist for me was world changing. Like, it's so, I think even just becoming a regular philosophical libertarian, which is an anarchist in my mind, just so we're clear.
Check your premises.
Yes. But your worldview changes so much, and you see so much of what you have been lied to about. You see how the state lies about everything, and how the media is
fucking say about me, you little bitch. I'll have you know I graduated top.
Sorry, go ahead.
We must have our fun. Yep. No, but that. You get to this point where you see that so much of what you have been told is not the truth. And so it always reminds me of that one verse in the Bible about with knowledge comes sorrow. And I felt like that when I became a libertarian. Like, oh my God, like there's a lot of bad in the world. It took me a while to dig out of that. Like, oh, it's not all bad, And but I think some people, just because they've lied about most things doesn't mean they're lying about everything, right? Yeah. Like, just because they've lied to you about, their authority over you doesn't mean the earth is flat. Like, what it would take in order for that conspiracy to happen in the thousands of years and all of the, like, there wouldn't be anyone who didn't know about it, because it'd have to include so many people. I mean, there's just some stuff out there that I think people, they go, well, that was a lie, so maybe I can believe a little of this. And they don't keep they kind of just let their thinking go to one side while they say, well, this is what the state narrative is, so it has to be something else.
Yeah. I mean, they couldn't cover up a dress with a white stain on it. They couldn't cover up, right. This, and they can't even decide what to feed kids for school lunches, but they're gonna somehow like orchestrate like this global event where event where like they had to kill like a couple was it almost 3,000 people in order to just go to war with Iraq, which all they had to do anyway was just, at that time at least, I'll just be like, oh, he had some evil demon, whatever. I don't know.
Right. They're gonna hide the ice wall
That was just a convenience that happened. That we're like, okay, now we can use this as an excuse to do what we wanted to do all this
Right.
time. Now we have a reason to do it. There could have been any other reasons that could have came down the line that they could have used.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's easy when you're like, I mean, David Icke is one of those guys that I've always liked fringe things. Even when I was a little kid, and I used to watch my all-time crush, Leonard Nimoy. This show he used to do called
Fact or Fiction, or was it? No, that was
it was
that was
no,
a Star
it was,
Trek guy.
Yeah, that was
We made it up.
Jonathan Frakes.
Yeah, there we go.
But anyways, Leonard Nimoy did a show like that where they would talk about like the story of Atlantis, and I had all these books when I was a kid that I really liked that sort of thing. And even now, when I was older, I would listen to like Art Bell and George Norrie and Jeff Rentz, Whitley Strieber, all those shows. I didn't believe most of what I heard on there. Sometimes there was some good stuff, but like with David Icke, there's a lot of things he talks about, like with authority and.
Have you ever walked out of a
certain things
mall into a huge parking area and realized you'd forgotten where you parked your car? Ever gone mountain biking?
Sorry, I had to.
Okay.
I had the drop, so I had to use it.
Gotta do it. But then you get into the lizard people, but you're kind of hooked in with some of the stuff that he's right about. Like, it's okay to think, well, he's right about this and he's wrong about that. Like, that's, I guess it's more of an academic. I sort of came to libertarianism more through what I think of as the academic side with the, I listened to talk radio is how I first thought I was a libertarian for many years. I was still
Neil
voting
Bortz?
Republican, but yeah, Neil Bortz. And, but then I started listening to Tom Woods. And that's a very much academic demographic. Right. And so, and I was married to a very academic person, and, there's got to be proof, there's got to be logic that flows. And what I find in a lot of people that I like, they're nice people. There's nothing evil about them, but what people will do is they make these wild jumps in logic. Or my favorite, the people who take a word, and because it sounds like something, they make this jump to it is this thing. And so I don't know what do you do with that? You can't, like, there's no logic that can go with that. Like, you can argue it from a logical point of view, but they have to be willing to say, okay, well, I made this jump in logic. And a lot of times they're just not. And that's fine. They can see the world how they want to. And a lot of them, I think they're right about a lot of things. It's not that they're my enemy or something. I just, for me, I have to have more input before I can say, yes, the earth is flat. I have to have more like actual science and input, and it doesn't have to rely on a huge conspiracy that would just be, I just, maybe I just don't believe enough, but I did that in my former life. I believed a lot of things and I took it on faith, and I'm not willing to do that anymore. So my standards of what I will accept are just higher, because I think skepticism is so valuable. I just don't think it can be overstated how valuable just common skepticism. You don't have to be brilliant to be a skeptic. And I think that's where you should like kind of be with everything, especially at first, is I'm a little bit skeptical about this. Maybe I should look into it a little more. Well,
there's some things you should be skeptical of, but if you're crossing the street, there's probably a good chance that the sidewalk is not made of water and you're not going to fall in. there's some assumptions you can just assume things are safe, right?
Yeah, yes, of course. Yeah. Yes, of course.
I'm sorry to go James Randi on you, but you got to be skeptical of the things that's reasonable to be skeptical about, right?
Yeah. Ideas, I know that every morning, when I get up, the sun is somewhere out there, even if I can't see it. I don't have to I don't have to do a bunch of research to make sure it's there, right? But you know, especially with ideas and things that you accept that are very they would make reality into a whole different thing if they were true. I think you have to be very skeptical of that because, look, even for me, when I first became a libertarian, and especially a voluntarist, it was my religion. It really was, and I think it was okay for the time. I needed, you know, I was replacing my old religion with this new one, and I've really kind of drifted away from that, not from the principles, but from having to proselytize or like I still like to talk to people about it. Don't get me wrong, but I'm more open to listening and maybe seeing some more nuance to things, especially if they're not about, you know, principle, if they're just about life in general or whatever. But I do think skepticism is very healthy. And a lot of times people just aren't skeptical enough of people they like and people who like, I have a good example of this. Mark Passio. The first time I accidentally came across Mark Passio. I had no idea who he was. I was listening to some David Icke things on YouTube. I just like that. I like religion. I like to read and listen to things about that. And so anyways, I came across a Mark Passio like seminar he was doing where he talked about order followers. I had never, like, it blew my freaking mind that that's immoral to just follow an order because it's given to you. And I thought that was amazing. And I really respect him for that. I'm really thankful that I came across him and heard that. I don't agree with a lot of, I don't even know what he says anymore. I hear about what he thinks, but I don't hear him. I don't really listen to his work too much.
Or Mark Passio, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I ended up having to do oh God, how long? I think we were going like 16 hours. It's a 16-hour live long stream about
thing with Patrick and Christian. Yeah, I saw part of that. Yeah, the natural law thing, and you know, I was in that for a little bit, and I had a conversation. Yes, the Buc-ee's. Yeah, that was great. But like I had a
people going like,
with a guy.
how am I supposed to take someone seriously who's wearing a squirrel outfit? And I'm like,
right,
it's a Buc-ee's onesie.
Right.
Don't misgender me.
It's not squirrel. Yeah. Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Yeah. But
Who do you think
I had
you
to talk
are?
with a guy. I had a guy in that chat that we were talking about. Do squirrels, you know, have rights? And I just, you know, you can make it, when you're just sold to an ideology, and he just kept saying the same thing. And it's like, well, let me try it this way. Let me try it this way. Some things they come to the point of religious belief. And I'm not saying anything about Mark Pat. I mean, I honestly, I don't know. I heard recently that he said like voluntarists aren't anarchists or something. I don't know. I don't care. I don't really care.
Yeah.
I know.
I'm so tired of that semantic debate. It's like, okay,
yeah,
fine. I'm not an anarchist, then call me something else. I don't care. Whatever.
Right. Yeah. I really don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what I believe,
it's
and
stupid,
I know it's
and
not.
I'm not going to waste my time on it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know it's not. We have to have complete control of society in order to become an anarchist society, like the Marxists or whatever. So,
or the anarcho-communist. If you ever look into like the history of like, was it Free Ukraine? Was it? I can't remember what it was called. It was something Ukraine, and then Catalonia. Oh, that was a nightmare scenario. That was a nightmare scenario. I mean, they literally had concentration camps in Spain, in the anarcho-communists and syndicalist camps. Like
it doesn't take that long either, does it?
No, it did not take that long. They already had concentration camps. Say what you will
about the United States, it took a little longer. You know, like I'm not saying they were better.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know if you ever heard this joke. Like, what kind of meat does a pastor eat on on Sunday? None. That's also true for the anarcho-communists.
Wow.
With all the clergy
That's-
that they were slaughtering, and then they
That
ran out
is
of
a
food.
joke with layers to it. Yeah, I don't know, what were we talking about? I'm doing the natural law thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think, and it's not. I mean, I'm using that as an example. I mean, I'm not trying to pick on the Passio crowd, but because I have friends that follow Mark Passio, we get along just fine. But it just seems like sometimes people are trying to draw divisions where they really don't. I mean, there are, but they don't need to be contentious. But I think he sort of makes them contentious for one.
Yeah, yeah, he does.
But like he goes after people pretty hard.
You can't go
but
after me unless you watch my 8-hour long live stream or presentation about
Right.
natural law. Okay, we did. And then what does he do? I'm
Yes.
not going to argue with you. And then all his fans are
Right,
like,
so-
he was in a squirrel outfit. Beaver, how dare
Right.
you?
That sounds like stuff that conservatives do, right? Like, you have pink hair, so I'm not going to listen to you. Jeffrey Tucker, you're gay. What could you have to say about it?
The biggest argument against Jeffrey Tucker is that like he constantly defends mediocrity at every single moment. I gotta say that. No. I gotta say that McDonald's is such a fascinating place where they make wonderful food, and they got these fish nuggets that were so great, and they got rid of them, and I have no idea why they would get rid of such a marvelous splendor of capitalism that is fish nuggets, and it come with this tartar dipping sauce that was just so amazing, and then gruel. Oh, let me tell you how amazing gruel is.
You do a pretty dang good Jeffrey Tucker. I mean, dude, I'd hang out with Jeffrey Tucker.
Oh, I have. He's cool.
Oh, he seems like such an awesome guy. And he lives in that really cool place in Atlanta that I actually have been to. Or he did. I don't know if he still does. But anyways, I'm more these days about...
By the way, he does drink Bud Light. He does drink it.
Serious?
Yes, he does drink Bud Light. He loves it.
He's like the ungayest gay dude I've ever seen. That's just an assumption on my part, but I'm assuming Jeffrey Tucker's gay. If I'm wrong, I apologize, Mr. Tucker.
I don't think that he's officially gay, but
it seems apparent. Like
I may have seen or heard things, but that's fine. You can do whatever you want. It's your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of noble in a world where people, it's the least interesting thing about people is who they want to fuck and what color they are. Like, but it's risen to the level of making you a hero. To the left, it's cops and soldiers on the right, and minorities and gender non-conforming or non-conforming whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff like that. You become a hero, and it's like, why can't they just be people who do the things they do? And and I understand that's a pretty naive way to look at it. I'm so tired of everyone trying to make heroes out of people for the most ridiculous things. I don't care, when you're consenting adults, I don't care what you do with that kind of thing. It doesn't confront me none, as we say. So I think it's kind of noble that you don't bring it out and make it the most, because that's definitely not the most interesting part of who he is. I mean, that's one aspect, but I think he's fascinating.
Yeah, there is an infamous quote from me that it still is true. The kind of women I'm into look like they can't say their gender in under 20 syllables. Absolutely true.
Right. The kind of women I'm into look like they can't say their gender in under 20 syllables.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm out of the running on that one then.
Danger hair, tattoos, all of it.
This is something too, like with the whole Mises takeover. I think they're going to have to really, of the pate, as Patrick says, the pate.
The libertarian pate.
You got to put your pinky in the air when you say it.
Pate.
they went out of their way to really piss off anyone who was, left of center, it seemed like. And there's a lot of good libertarians who would be considered, left libertarians. I think there are. I think there are people who, I'm not talking about like woke stuff. I mean, I have a friend who is here in Knoxville who is transgendered, who is an ANCAP, and who can sit and hang and not get offended about, your pronouns and all that bullshit. But I feel like they went out of their way to make this a problem. And so on my Twitter profile, I have pink hair. And
danger hair.
Yeah. I kind of did it on purpose.
Like a frog that's poisonous, it warns you with their bright colors.
Hey, you're the one who said, that's, you're into
I can't help it. I don't want to like it. I just do.
You just do. Yeah, it's okay. There's all kinds of sexuality. All right. But I went into this room on Twitter with some Mises people, and the first thing one of them said when I was in there is, "Look at this pink-haired bitch." Okay. I was just like, oh, all right. I didn't say it. I just ended up leaving the room because it was retarded. Like they weren't talking about anything important or interesting. But that kind of thing, like maybe in the grand scheme of things, in the people who really think about strategy within Mises Caucus, they were working to kind of push the lefty woke people out. But there are a lot more of the day-to-day, let's say, libertarians who really start to, they don't understand the difference. And so now because someone has pink hair, they can't, like, you're going to call them a bitch. I might be a bitch, but you don't know me. Like, that sort of thing, it became very off-putting, I think. And so it's like, a lot of times, well, you can say anything you want, but should you? I mean, what is your point in speaking? I think that has to be thought about too. And do you want to reach people or not? And I'm not saying don't be radical. I'm just saying maybe making assumptions about people off the bat isn't the way to go because of the way they look.
I have two minds about the Mecox. I kind of support. I did support them, and I had like a very. I wasn't really kind of involved with that. Like I have a friend who was like one of the head people in the Bear County Libertarian Party, who was kind of upset by it, but not because it was part of the whole woke thing. Like he is very anti-woke. He told me confidential that there was things that were going on with the Mises Caucus they were doing that were a little underhanded. But I was like, okay, that's not probably the best way to handle things. But at the same time, look at the underhanded things that the party was doing in order to try to mitigate that.
Right.
I think that was just in response to that. That doesn't make it right.
Right.
But
it's understandable, but not right.
Before I even knew that, like I was just coming more at it like there was just too much garbage in the party that needed to go. And it came from not just the woke. It's not even the woke thing that I was really concerned about, but which is great that Vermin and all those people left. Fuck them.
Yeah.
Like, good riddance.
They didn't really belong there.
No.
That's just the thing. They didn't belong.
I don't think people understand like who Vermin really is. They just kind of like see him in like certain videos and stuff. And he always panders to any kind of interviewer that he interviews. And so if a good libertarian interviews him, he's going to try to say good libertarian things. But on his Twitter thing during the summer of riots, he was going like, "What about the property? Is the property okay?" Just like mocking anybody who was concerned about private property destruction. A libertarian upset about private or not being okay with private property destruction, which was I think was like that was the line for me. I was like, I'm done.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
done.
I mean, he definitely.
He's a communist.
Yeah, he is. He is. I think he would probably admit to that. I don't know.
A libertarian socialist. I think that's what he would probably.
Yeah, libsoc. Yeah, You know, I interviewed him once and I gave him a little pushback on some things. But, you know, I do respect anyone who mocks the system. And I think he's done it very
Effectively.
yes,
I'll give
very
him that.
effectively. Most people don't, I mean, a lot of the main streamers just don't get it. They're like, what, a boot on your head? What? Mandatory toothbrushing and ponies? Like, they don't get it. But
No, I mean, it's not that far removed from serious candidates.
exactly.
He
It
just
really is.
he just acknowledges that it's silly. I will give him credit
Right.
where credit's due, but at the same time,
And so it's like,
I don't think that
I
LP
can
is the right place for him if he's going to
Right,
start
no.
spouting that shit.
and that's the problem. Like, you know, I can respect that about him, but I certainly don't respect the commie stuff. And, you know, property, I don't think you can divorce libertarianism from property. And I know people try, I guess, but for me, that's where all rights start. Right? And so, I don't see how you can divorce that. And if you don't believe in property, the Libertarian Party should not be a home for you. The problem is that it's a political party, and of course, there's always factions vying for power. And when certain people have the football, they're going to couch like with Sarwark. This is one of the arguments I always had about. Yeah, I always had about just the pandering.
Jesse Sommelier of the Libertarian Party, yes.
Yes, did you see that?
Yes.
Oh my God, that video was beautiful. I thought that was so
He hit me.
funny. I laughed
Buddy,
my
we have the whole thing
ass
on
off.
video. Buddy, we have the whole
I
thing
know
on
he
video.
like it takes him a few seconds too to realize. Oh, he's such an opportunist. I'm
Yeah.
surprised he didn't do it right away, but it took him a couple seconds to realize there was an opportunity there.
Yeah.
But he, what were we talking about?
Sarwark.
Oh,
Sarwark
yes,
was saying
and
something.
the whole like when Mike Shipley was in the party and they were talking about gay rights and how they said the Libertarian Party supports gay rights, and I was in the party at that point. I was
What
in
is
there for
gay
about a year and a
rights?
half. I know, and so. There was an actual issue in our local party here because there's a family who has a trans child and a gay child in the Libertarian Party, or they were. I don't know what they're doing now, but they were very upset that the Libertarian Party, most of the people here didn't come out to the Gay Pride Parade that year and support them and walk with them. And I tried explaining to them, libertarianism doesn't support gay rights. It supports individual rights.
Yeah.
And gays happen to be
Human rights.
individuals. And yeah, human rights. And so I think that whole thing about the pandering to the left by saying we support gay rights, you actually end up hurting real people because then they get in here and they expect something that's not what they think it is. It's selling them something that's not there. It's saying, there are plenty of people, you know, we all agree as libertarians that you have the right to live your life in a way that doesn't harm others and do, you know, do whatever you want. But that doesn't mean we support it. Like, I think you should be able to do heroin without going to prison. I don't think you should do heroin.
Yeah.
You know, there's a difference. Like, I personally am not going to go and buy you the heroin for you to do. But am I going to say you should be in prison for that? No. You should be stopped or you can't do that to your body. No. So that's what the difference is. And it's a really important difference. And so I think that because it's a political party, people often, they pander to certain groups, just like many of them pander to Republicans for Republican things. And you really give people, like when you see libertarian candidates arguing that we need a strong military, you are off the fucking reservation and someone has miscommunicated to you what libertarianism is. Yeah. If you're not necessarily, you know, libertarianism is necessarily anti-state. If you are not anti-state, this is not the place for you. Libertarianism is necessarily about property, and if you don't believe in private property, it's not the place for you. And I'm not talking about even the party, just the ideology itself. But I think the party has been such a poor representative of that. And hopefully, I mean, I don't know. I was involved with the Mises Caucus at first as well when I was still in the party, and I left shortly thereafter.
Well, I'm all in, but not for politics. I think I'll get into it. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, and so I would love to see a party with the name that actually represents libertarianism. That's
why I'm there. Yeah, that's the only reason.
Yeah,
I'm there.
Exactly. Like they do use our name. I've had a lot of friends. I don't know if you know Tommy Salmons. He's a good friend of mine, and I was on his show, and he was like, "I'm gonna quit calling myself a libertarian, but I know you think differently." But I'm like, "Fuck it, they have to take that from me. Like, I am a libertarian."
Hands.
Yeah, they have to take it from my cold dead hand. You have to pry it away from me because it means something, and it's important to fight for, I think, because the ideology is beautiful in my mind. It's worthy. It's valuable. It brings peace and prosperity to people.
And it has danger hair.
Danger hair?
Because it was beautiful. It must have danger hair.
I have thoughts on that, but I don't think you want to talk about them on this show. I think it's valuable. And I think when you don't represent it and you say, well, we got to get people to vote for us, you're done. You've lost the whole reason the party is in existence in the first place. If you're not going to be radical, you might as well not be. And I think, like, Harry Brown was a radical freaking libertarian, when he said with the Bush-Gore election, these two candidates have both admitted to doing cocaine. Do you think they would be better men for having spent time in prison?
Yeah.
That's a radical
well,
message.
I mean, but not for cocaine, but I definitely think they should have been in prison for sure.
Right, they should have been. But just asking the populace, these people are the two serious candidates, and they've both admitted to breaking the law and doing something that millions of young men and women across the country are put in prison for, and their lives are ruined.
Yep.
And yet you're going to say that that's a good, I think that's a radical message. And I think there's a way to be a radical libertarian and get the ideas. And for me, it's never was about winning elections. And that's why even when I ran for governor here in Tennessee and came in third place, by the way, I'm the people's governor.
The people's not governor.
I'm sorry?
The people's not governor.
Yeah, the people's not governor. I said to people on the shows that I went on, I don't believe in the political system. I don't think you need someone to rule you. I believe in the actual ideals of freedom. I believe in free speech. I believe in self-defense. I really believe those things. I believe them more than any of your candidates, and I think you can use that platform. I mean, I got 5,200 votes or something like that. That's not all just libertarians in Tennessee. I'd had to have somebody else maybe.
Yeah, probably a lot of protest votes. I don't like either of these
maybe.
candidates, and I'm not going to vote for the other guy because the other guy is probably worse than the guy I'd probably like a little bit more, but fuck him too. I'm going to vote for the third party just to be move more this direction, please.
Right. Yeah. And my name is Clark, my last name. And so on the ballot, I was third. So I'm sure that helped too. But, there were people that when I had the radio show here in town, they were demanding I be taken off the air. And then after the radio show, once it was canceled, the morning show guy who I love and respect, he's a constitutional conservative, he's a genuine one. And he kind of loves voluntarism now. He doesn't see how it's possible, without, the state or whatever. He has some hard time. Let's just put it that way. But he had me on every Tuesday, called it Voluntary Tuesdays. And then when the station owner was getting calls to have me what is she doing on here? This is ridiculous. This woman, because I didn't love Trump or cops. He basically said, look, you guys told me when I had the show that I could have whoever I wanted on. And if she can't be on here, then I'm not going to have, you're not going to have me in the show anymore. I love that he put this show on the line for me, And I got to talk to people, and there were people that were Republicans that have messaged me since and said, you know, I thought you were crazy with what you were saying about cops. You made me so mad.
Oh yeah. Have you noticed that conservatives have completely changed? They're done with the thin blue line stuff. They're slowly, they're not done with it. They're moving away.
Not
from it.
in this area.
Yeah. Well, but they're definitely moving away from it, especially with all the Capitol Hill riots and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and the whole, you know, death, you know, thing that was here for a couple of years, and they saw what police were doing, and that they're part of it. You know, they're still trying to figure their way out of it. But even before that, they would message me and say, I thought you were crazy and I hated you. But every time I watched the news, I saw what you were saying was true. Like, you just have to get an audience with people and be willing for them to hate you a little bit. And that's, you know, that's not easy for me. I don't like confrontation. I know people, that surprises them sometimes. I really don't like to argue with people. I'm low in agreeableness, very low. I'm like lower than a lot of men. I'm like a 19 and most men are 20 on the
really
big
need to take one of
5
those
scale.
Tests. Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's pretty cool.
Very not agreeable.
I cried for 3 days after I took it because I thought, God, I'm a terrible person. I got a 0 in industriousness. Okay. But sad reacts only. But I think you just have to, I try not to be a dick. You know, I mean, there are some times on the radio when I would say things like rape cages on purpose. And people would, like, one of the guys that was my co-host at the end, he really didn't like that I used that because he says it turns people off. We're on a Christian conservative radio station in Knoxville, freaking Tennessee. And I was like, but if people are going to advocate for young men, especially, to be sent to prison, they need to know what they're sending them to. If you want to advocate for young people to be put in these places for things that are victimless crimes, then you need to know that they're going to be used like fucking currency. They're going to be raped. If you really care about rape culture, if feminists really cared about it, they'd be down at men's prisons and at your local military installation, because those are where the real rape culture is. And so if you're going to advocate for those things, then I think you have to look at the dirty truth. And I'm not going to shy away from that. And it's going to make people angry.
No, see, that's not the issue. I used to try to give them some, the feminists that is, try to give them some, again, try to be charitable with them as much as possible. But when they started saying things like, well, you know, like when family courts rule always in favor of the women, that's part of patriarchy, but that's like backfiring against them. And we're against that too. And we advocate against that. It's like, right. When was the last time you protested that at a family court?
Right.
Date time. Let's go. Not one time in the history of humanity have feminists been outside of a family court protesting the injustices of men because of the patriarchy. Not once. Not ever. And not even since I've been calling them out for it. Not once. Not ever. They won't.
Yeah. Because
it's not what that's about. They don't care about rape culture. They care about, you know, their issues are completely, have everything to do with women or birthing people. I guess that's what they're calling them.
Right. Women.
Yeah.
I don't call myself a feminist, and I don't really think I am. But I don't think they're wrong about everything. But for me, everything that needs, you know, one word that encompasses everything, you know, they say feminism is about everyone. Like, individualism is about everyone. Like, I'm an individualist, and I don't need, why does it have to be couched in terms of feminism in order to be okay? Like, why are you so upset that I won't call myself a feminist? I've been called a gender traitor. Oh, because I have a vagina. I have to think like you. I see.
Sherry voluntary confirmed queen bee.
That's right. But, you know, it's like, what about us both having the same anatomy makes me beholden to your ideology? I don't understand that. Nothing. And especially when you're wrong, I'm going to call it out. But when you're right, you're right. You know, they're not wrong about everything. Feminism in general, this new like the new stuff is just there's some really insane things. But you know, I don't I think as an individualist, I can be concerned with everyone. And what happens to men in family court is unconscionable. And not only men who, like, I have a friend, he was someone I dated for a little bit, going through a divorce. The wife claimed he had hit her, and over like a slap too. It wasn't like he claims he didn't do it, but she claims he did. And his children were taken away. He had to get, I'm not saying he should have hit her, but he never was accused of abusing the children ever. And they were in a contentious fight when she, they're getting divorced. They were in this fight, whatever. So he had to fight to get his children back for a few years. She would do things like show up at the supervised visitation, and she had a restraining order against him and knew that, he's supposed to be there at a certain time. She would get out of her car and then go into the place and say, you need to call the police. He's within, whatever, he's not supposed to be around me. The women at the place where they have the visitation told her she needed to get in her car and leave, that they knew what she was doing. Like, it was very clear, but the courts don't see it that way. They just look at the letter of the law. Oh, you were technically here, whatever. Or men who find out that they're not the children or the children of that they thought were theirs, or even knew that weren't theirs. They have to pay child support for them. They're ordered to by the courts. That's so wrong. That's a fraud against them. If someone lies to you and says, this is your child, and then you find out that it's not, you might do that out of the goodness of your heart because you love the child. Maybe you would do it, but you certainly shouldn't be forced to. So there's a lot of things that happen, and men are sort of disposable.
I will say this. That if you put your name on the birth certificate, this is my baby, and it is biologically your baby, I think you should have some responsibility since you're the other half of that.
Sure.
And if we're gonna have abortion restrictions, I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think if you bring a baby into this world, you and the machine that created the baby, in Patrick's scenario, you both have a responsibility to do something about that to the best of your abilities. But at the same time, it's like, okay, if it's not your baby, then you shouldn't be held to it unless you're like, okay, like the father, we don't know who the father is. She was sleeping around at the time. I forgave her, but I'm fathering this child in terms of right. Then I think you should be on the hook.
Yeah. You obligated yourself. Yeah. Yes, of course. But if a fraud was committed against you, I think that's a different thing.
I agree.
And I think men feel pressured to raise other men's children. I've seen so many times where, a man is like applauded and lauded because, I know it's not mine, but I'm going to take care of him because I'm going to do that. I'm not going to let this child go fatherless. And that's a good instinct if that's really what you want to do. But I don't think that people should look at a person in a bad light if they don't want to support children that aren't theirs.
Yeah, exactly.
I understand that. I sometimes don't want to support my own kids, but
as much as I don't
I love my kids.
I'm sure they're fine. Keep them away from me.
They're fine.
I don't.
Juggling knives and stuff.
Like if they want to play Ninja Turtles with me, that's fine. But then, okay, go home.
Just don't go into the room, the back room with Mr. Jesus.
No. Yeah, I don't like kids in any way, shape, or form. Really, I don't like kids. I'm like W.C. Fields. Get out of here, kid. You bother me.
Go away, kid. You bother me. Yeah. There's a lot.
As much as I don't like Dennis Prager, for many reasons, I do think that he did say one thing that made sense to me, but I would also apply this to rights as well. He says that like if you need a qualifier in term before the word justice, you're not talking about justice. So, ecological justice,
right?
All this kinds of justice. They're not really justice. Social justice. Right. Those are all ways to say that we need to be unjust to people to give justice to some entity that doesn't really exist. I think that also applies to like rights. transgender rights, gay rights. There shouldn't be that. Like, you should be able to do whatever it is that you want to do, and with anybody who you want to voluntarily contract or to do other things with you, you should be free to do that. No restrictions on that whatsoever, so long as you're not hurting other people. That's just called rights.
Right.
If you're going to say gay rights, then you're starting to go, okay, well, we're going to exclude straight people from certain things.
Right.
And be unjust to them and take away their rights in order to give special privileges to this group of people.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if it's gay, trans, black, white, it doesn't matter. All of it. It goes against both sides too.
Right.
It's not just one particular type of it, right? It's not just against the woke people. It's also against like the far, really weird right-winger people too.
Right. That's quite insightful.
Yeah. So
it really is, because but the qualifier means you're making categories.
Yeah. So where can people find your stuff if they're interested?
Oh, I don't have stuff anymore. I don't even have stuff anymore. This is my stuff right now.
Lolberts.com.
I'm on Facebook. I'm trying to get on Float more. Float was like, I got out of the habit of using it because I was having a hard time on my phone, and I think that's fixed now. So I'm gonna try and get on there more, but mostly I'm on Facebook, y'all. Instagram, Twitter,
Nice.
The trinity of evil there. That's where I'm at. I don't have any shows or anything right now, so.
So we got no super chats this stream, but we did have one comment that I feel I need to read from Danny Duchamp.
Okay.
Eviction,
hello, Danny.
Evictionist. Abortion is just like when you can't pay rent, so your landlord crushes your head with steel tongs. Yeah. Accurate.
Those forceps, man, they're deadly.
And unlike previous episodes where I started it ripping off some other podcast or YouTuber's intro, I'm going to steal somebody's outro. So, Sherry, what has been your favorite part of this podcast?
You know what, Jim? My favorite part is actually being able to sit down and have a conversation with you, honestly, because I feel like I've sort of known you for a little while, but I've never really gotten to like have a conversation with you. So this has been good.
You